Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would first like to thank the organizers, Journalists and Writers Foundation, for inviting us to address this event as a keynote speaker for the panel on the global state of peace and conflict resolution at this year's SDG conference. I will be speaking on behalf of the permanent representative of Slovenia to the United Nations since, as you all were aware, this is the busiest week of the year for us diplomats in New York, and this gathering of this year at the 77th session of the UN General Assembly is particularly important since it comes after 2 years of pandemic restrictions on in-person meetings. I am speaking from the point of view of a small and peaceful country. In fact, according to the Global Peace Index, Slovenia is the 7th most peaceful country in the world. And this being the SDG conference, let me also mention that Slovenia ranks 15th on the SDG index, which indicates our progress in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. This goes hand in hand with our strong commitment to multilateralism and international law, which for small states like Slovenia are the key guarantors of peace and security. With this, I would like to highlight the main aspects that altogether enable and strengthen conflict prevention and resolution from the point of view of Slovenia. First, respect for human rights. In order to maintain peace and security, it is necessary that human rights of all, including the most vulnerable groups, are respected, protected, and enforced. Human rights apply to everyone, everywhere. When human rights are grossly violated, this can lead to the emergence of conflicts and can also serve as a possible first indicator of potential atrocities taking place. While protection of civilians is the primary responsibility of every state, some responsibility also lies with the international community that in such cases should not and must not look away. The principle of the responsibility to protect and the system of alerts and early warnings when mass violations of human rights occur or might occur serves as an important tool for conflict prevention. Slovenia has been a strong supporter of the R2P principle since its inception in 2005. Especially due to our historical experience with the conflicts and atrocities committed in our neighborhood. We should strive for finding effective avenues for the application of the R2P principle, since its goal is to protect societies from atrocity crimes. When it comes to conflict resolution, prevention of conflicts, and building sustainable peace, inclusivity of the processes is essential. Women and representatives of all affected groups, including minorities and the youth, whose human rights are often violated most severely in situations leading up to and during conflict, absolutely should be included in these processes. Women constitute about half of the global population and are a strong driving force for peace. As the agents of change, their equal, meaningful, and effective participation enables addressing the root causes of conflict and ensuring sustainable peace and accountability for crimes committed. Slovenia therefore integrates the support for and promotion of the women peace and security and youth peace and security agendas in all its activities. The protection of civilians and vulnerable populations is also closely linked to the issue of protection of the environment. We all need a viable environment that allows us to survive and enables us a certain quality of life. Slovenia has therefore been a part of the core group leading the process for universal recognition of the right to clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right. With the triple planetary crisis of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste that are threatening the environment and thereby human future, the resolution on the right to a healthy environment adopted by the General Assembly in July of this year is an important step in countering the trend. Degradation of environment, and especially access to water, is one of the threats that can lead to conflicts. Working on this issue now is a preventative step for the peace and security in the future. This element is also very closely connected to the second aspect of conflict prevention I would like to address, sustainable development. Along with the respect for human rights just mentioned, eradication of poverty and sustainable development serve as building blocks for peaceful and resilient societies. The world is currently facing crisis after crisis that is deeply impacting and even erasing progress made on the implementation of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and its Sustainable Development Goals, that was negotiated and adopted by all of the UN member states as a blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet. The COVID pandemic has exposed many vulnerabilities in all states, however, even more severely in developing countries, and slowed or even reversed many of the gains made in the last 10 years towards implementing the SDGs. Furthermore, the challenges of global food insecurity and rising energy prices have been made even worse by the effects of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, clearly demonstrating and exposing the world's interdependence. The consequences of this conflict are felt all over the world, but most severely in developing countries that have been counting on food exports from both Russia and Ukraine to mitigate the rising food insecurity due to other crises, most prominently the effects of climate change. The impacts of climate change and environmental degradation are clearer and more widespread than ever. They act as a risk multiplier. The consequence is an increase in climate-related risks to human security, development, violent conflicts, and peace-building efforts. I will now turn to the third element that is an essential tool to address this crisis, which is multilateralism. In a world that is as diverse as ours, dialogue is one of the most important tools we have to foster understanding, acceptance, and cooperation, and is the only path to effectively addressing challenges that require collective actions. Contemporary challenges dictate the need for a strong, rules-based, and inclusive multilateral system with the United Nations at its core. The UN is the only universal forum where states can have these exchanges and address global challenges from pandemics, climate change, water scarcity, biodiversity loss, and food insecurity to conflicts, armed aggression, and other serious breaches of international law, including the UN Charter. The UN has its successes, but also some challenges. The organization arose from the ashes of the Second World War to prevent further wars, and the fact is that there has not been a worldwide armed conflict during the lifetime of the UN. However, the sheer number of more limited-scale conflicts and crises is rising at an alarming rate. I believe that multilateralism is and will remain indispensable, despite being in need of reform. And this does include the United Nations, where reform processes are ongoing and going forward, including the reform of the UN Security Council. In the meantime, the UN system does continue to deliver on its important tasks, which crucially includes providing urgent humanitarian assistance to populations in need, whether it is due to natural or man-made disasters, including conflict. And if we speak about global conflict resolution, we need to again mention the UN Security Council, the body holding the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Regardless of its challenges, the fact remains that the Security Council is the key pillar of the international peace and security architecture and has no substitute. It provides a standing forum where member states can address pressing issues of peace and security. And it is a forum in which Slovenia was proud to contribute during our membership in 1998 and 1999. And we aspire to take on this important and responsible role again in 2024 and 2025. The last important element that I want to highlight is the respect for international law. International law, with the UN Charter as its foundation, serves as a basis for friendly relations between states and a guarantor of peace and security. States voluntarily bind themselves to international treaties and contribute to the progressive development of international law and are therefore expected to respect their obligations. International law, like any law, also provides mechanisms for dealing with its breaches and consequences thereof, especially in cases of conflicts and violations of the UN Charter. There should be no impunity for the most serious violations of international law that often happen during armed conflicts. Accountability contributes to a broader sense of justice, both within and outside affected societies. It also prevents the recurrence of violations through deterrence of future crimes. The processes of determining accountability through its investigative parts can also help to determine, examine, and address the root causes of conflicts. Accountability is therefore an integral part of prevention and sustainable peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, To conclude, the current world crisis and conflicts require action on all levels of society. We are hopeful that the processes currently ongoing in the United Nations under our common agenda, which is a historic opportunity to bring about the reforms in global governance, will contribute to the resolution of current crisis and setting up a more networked and inclusive multilateral system that will make sure that the future generations have all the conditions to enable them to flourish. Slovenia is determined to be a constructive part of this process. I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you fruitful discussions at this year's conference. Thank you.